Have you ever been a doctor who's being proven less safe than a busy street?
Hello, and welcome to Wow of True, the podcast of our specific wildest memes. I'm Andrea, famously not Amanda.
We're your one-stop internet culture shop here to dissect what's going viral, why we care, and how this might affect our real human lives. I'm famously not Isabel, but I am Amanda.
Anyone can be famous on the internet. Why not two people with private Instagram accounts? I'm Caro.
So this is my friends, Andrea and Caro. They have private Instagram accounts, but they are here to just, be on a podcast and talk about their very specific interests. Should we answer?
Yeah, I want to check in with my pals. How are you doing?
I'm good. I just recorded an episode with Isabel where Isabel promised to send people fancy floss, so I'm excited about the follow-through on that. And now we're recording this episode, which is a untethered in time episode where we're gonna go for it. A thing that commonly happens lately is that Isabel has a concussion and then I also have something going on at the same time. It's just a thing that's happening. So next time that happens, that'll be when you're listening to this.
I'm gonna strongly tether us in time by saying it is currently December 16th at 11:32 a.m. Yes, Caro, your hand is raised.
Yeah, it's a fun fact, the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party today.
Nice.
Oh, that's today.
And me without a gift.
Embarrassing.
Well, that's why I gave you holiday gifts before this, because I was actually celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party.
As we do every year, as is tradition.
Yeah.
Every year is the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party, for our friend group specifically.
Well, earlier this week was also the 15th anniversary of George Bush getting hit with a shoe.
I thought he didn't get hit.
Well, no, he didn't get hit, but he got hit emotionally.
The Secret Service took a hit.
Waka waka.
So, Caro and Andrea are my real-life friends who have very, very specific interests and want to share them. So, first, Caro, what's up?
Hi everyone, I'm Caro, and I'm just gonna say all of this right now. I'm not a historian, I'm just someone who likes to read books. That said, I'm going to tell Andrea the story of Ignac Semmelweis, who is the father of hand washing. We haven't talked about this. What do you know about Ignac Semmelweis?
I listened to the Sawbones episode on him, probably 2 or 3 years ago.
I have never listened to Sawbones.
Okay. I know he's the hand washing guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting the guy who did hand washing and the guy who, I think he popularized it, confused, because that's the guy who, he took a bunch of cocaine out on a boat. Well, he was actually trying to quit cocaine. And then he got into the New York harbor, said, fuck it, thank God I brought all this cocaine with me. Went back to New York. Anyway, I'm thinking of that guy, so I don't know how much I know about Ignac Semmelweis.
Before I start the story, some quick behind the scenes for the listeners is the idea for Andrea and I doing a couple episodes of Wow If True came from Amanda asking us if we wanted to come on to talk about Taylor Swift, and we patently refused. So when I was structuring this episode, I tried and failed to organize his life into eras of Taylor Swift songs. So I might be able to have some of them at some points, but mostly, Andrea, if at any point you want to chime in and announce what era it is, feel free to do so.
Okay, right now we're famously not in his hand washing era.
The Taylor Swift idea was that when I was talking about the insane fan theory that Taylor Swift wrote the Harry Potter fan fiction, All the Young Dudes, I was like, what other insane Taylor Swift fan theories are there? Because there's a lot of them. I feel like there's so many that I don't even know. And then it just kind of turned into this. But also, Andrea famously has the relationship with Wow If True of one time me, Andrea, and Isabel went to see MCR, and at midnight on the car back, I made Andrea listen to the upcoming Wow If True episode because I had to listen to it in order to make sure it was okay to post. And it was a great time. Gerard Way.
I also famously wasn't invited to come on and talk about Gerard Way, even though I really, really wanted to. But that's fine, and also I didn't do my thing about him.
Yeah, well, if you have any Gerard Way fun facts to pepper in while we're talking about hand washing.
I don't think he washes his hands a lot. He seems like a dirty man.
So with all of that context out of the way, Ignac Semmelweis was born in 1818. For all the America heads out there, James Monroe was president at the time, and we had 20 states.
I famously had a James Monroe baseball card as a kid.
What?
Because I bought a pack of baseball cards and there was just a James Monroe card in there.
The president?
Yeah.
Did he play baseball?
No, it was like a president card, but my brother and I thought it was really funny, so we had a very treasured location in our little card book where James Monroe had his own sheet, and it was just him there.
That's gorgeous.
So never forget 5th President James Monroe.
He was born in Hungary. I think he was born in what is now Budapest. He had like a fairly comfortable upbringing. In 1837, he went to the University of Vienna. He was originally going to study law, but for some reason switched to medicine. He got his doctoring degree in 1844. I think this is pretty obviously his self-titled era. You know, he's establishing himself.
I really thought you were still talking about James Monroe at first. And I was like, he was born in Austria? How could he be president? I was like, this doesn't make any sense.
Actually, I think Brett Van Buren might have been the first president who was born in, like, America.
Congratulations to him.
Oh, well, yeah, because I guess the other people would have been born in, like, the colonies or England? Wow.
I think so. Some context around what's going on medically that's actually super relevant to our story is as Semmelweis is getting his medical training, becoming a doctor, he becomes an obstetrician specifically. There's this push to make people deliver in hospitals as opposed to in their homes like they used to. Birth specifically is getting more medicalized. It's starting to be the realm of doctors instead of like the village midwife. And around this time, there starts to be an uptick in puerperal fever, which I'm going to call childbed fever because I can't pronounce that word very well. But basically, childbed fever is exactly what it sounds like. It's when someone develops an infection after giving birth. It's pretty deadly. A lot of people were very concerned about dying. I mean, this is obviously giving birth is still quite dangerous, but it was very extra dangerous. This is pre-penicillin, pre-germ theory, all of that.
Is this because they were using their dirty, dirty hands to pull the babies out?
Yeah.
And then we're going to the next person and using their dirty little fingers. Gross.
Yucky.
It's because doctors were really like, hey, let me get in there and just kind of poke around a little bit. And let me just kind of put my dirty hands in. And birth is medically traumatic, making the body very susceptible to all sorts of infections. And doctors were going, here are those germs.
This is also the era where doctors or surgeons, if they had a lot of blood on their outfit, they were like, wow, that guy's good at surgery.
Mm-hmm. That guy's covered in blood. He's so good at his job.
He's so good
So
at
is that
surgery.
the red era?
Yeah. Amanda, you're a genius.
Thank you. Thank you.
So 2 years after graduating from medical school, Semmelweis goes to Vienna General Hospital to work as the first obstetrical clerk, which is basically like the head resident. He was involved in teaching people. He observed and like managed really complicated births. He also was in charge of signing off on death certificates, which it turns out was important for our story later. At Vienna General Hospital, there were two clinics. One for giving birth. One was with the doctors and the other was midwives. And the doctor clinic, which was the first clinic, had a 10% mortality rate.
Oh no.
That's too high.
Yeah. And the second clinic of midwives had a 4% mortality rate. And the facts of these differing mortality rates were a known fact to the point where people basically, you would be assigned a hospital. Like if you just showed up one day, it was like everyone's going to the first clinic that day. The next day, everyone was going to the second clinic. The day after that, back to the first. And
so is the first clinic produced by Scooter Braun and the second clinic is Taylor's version?
no, because
Because they're the same, I guess.
What if Scooter Braun had a 10% death rate? That would be so rough for a music producer.
also, I would argue that the second clinic had a much higher consistent quality than the Taylor's versions ones, but I might ask you to cut that.
Absolutely dunk on her. Absolutely get her ass.
I feel like we have some audience people that are Swifties, but I feel like they're the kind of Swifties that'd be like, yeah, that's fair.
1989 TV was a dud, I'm sorry.
Get his ass.
Anyways, but like the facts of these differing mortality rates for the clinics, not Taylor Swift songs, they were so well known that when people showed up and were told that, oh, you're going to the doctor clinic, they would beg to go to the other clinic because they wanted to live.
What?
And
I wanted to live?
Crazy.
Selfish.
people are such dramatic bitches sometimes. And it was a hospital. It was like a low-income hospital. So I think if you gave birth there, you got care. But if you gave birth somewhere else, you weren't eligible for lower cost care. But basically, some people would find out that it was a doctor clinic day, and they would just wait and give birth in the street instead. And they had a lower mortality rate than the people who delivered in the doctor hospital.
Sounds like there is some contamination happening, and maybe there is a medical innovation that can prevent that.
Boy, do you know how to structure a podcast episode.
Well, all the time Isabel and I are like, oh, here's a good segue, but then it makes it a worse segue because we acknowledge the segue, but it feels so like conversationally weird to be like, well, that reminds me of this other thing that I've taken a lot of notes on.
So Semmelweis, he's humiliated by this. He's like, we gotta stop. We're getting shown up by the midwives. We gotta
in
stop.
The street.
I think the street is the one that really made him have a little come to Jesus moment.
Getting shown up by a road is hard to do, and yet when it happens.
Have you ever been a doctor who's being proven less safe than a busy street?
It's rough, buddy.
So he set out trying to figure out what was going on. He was determined to get to the bottom of it. And he actually did a really interesting, because, you know, these two hospitals were so similar in a lot of ways, other than the death part. And he basically just went through what the differences were one by one and tried to see if that would impact the mortality rates. He looked at everything from the diet of the patients when they were in the hospital to the religious practice of the clinicians.
The devil's in this one. That's why they're dying.
As a little sidebar, one of the changes he made was he told the priest who would come in to give the last rites to dying people to stop ringing the bell as he went through the ward, and basically like, ding, ding, someone is dying, ding, ding, someone in a very similar situation as you, ding, ding.
Oh, man.
And so Semmelweis was like, maybe we can try not doing that for a little bit and see if it helps. And it's one of those things where it's like, bananas that had to be said.
Bro, stop rubbing it in.
Did it help?
Not in terms of germs, but I imagine it helped morale a bit.
Chief Vibes Officer Ignac Semmelweis. Maybe don't toll the death.
But ultimately he realizes that one of the biggest difference between the hospitals lies in who works there and how they're trained. So the second clinic, as I mentioned, was for midwives, while the first clinic was not only for doctors, but it was a teaching hospital for doctors. So during this time period, it's when medical students had started doing dissections of bodies to learn about human anatomy. And so they would be dissecting these patients who had unfortunately passed, usually of puerperal fever, and then they would go and help their live patients give birth.
Is this before or after body snatching?
I think it was during, but towards the tail end of that, because like dissections were commonplace enough that there started to be a more steady legal supply of bodies. But I actually don't know about body snatching in Vienna and that part of Europe.
I don't actually know what body snatching is. I just know the Radiohead song Body Snatchers, which says a lot about me.
I would love to tell you what body snatching was. So doctors figured out pretty fast that you need to know what's going on inside people, because famously women's uteruses aren't moving all around their body. And so I can't remember the name of the guy, but he ended up like starting dissecting people, and he learned so much, and he was like, we should probably tell other people to do this. But there wasn't a good way to get bodies.
This was back when Christians believed that your body had to be intact in order to get into heaven, like in order to preserve your soul.
That is rough.
So dissecting bodies was a huge taboo. Back to Andrea.
Yeah, so they started, basically, the medical school started hiring people to go into graves at night and just go take bodies and bring them back to the medical school. And you would get paid the most for fresh ones. And this was ended up being such a common practice that people who obviously didn't want to get their body snatched because they wanted to get into heaven started doing like crazy stuff to coffins. They started like hiring people to stand guard basically until like enough time had passed that it was like not a usable body anymore. Well, they usually just snuck in, like wheelbarrowed, undug the grave, like broke a coffin out open, pulled a dude out, threw him on a wheelbarrow, and like pushed the dirt back in the grave in peace.
Damn. Can't believe Christianity impeded the development of science.
What?
Never. If anyone's interested in this, there's actually a really interesting book that discusses body snatching in the United States, specifically as it related to chattel slavery. It's called The Price for Their Pound of Flesh. I forget who it's by, but it's very good. So yeah, this is when dissections are going on, and it's an important scientific discovery. People are getting better medical care. However, they're getting worse medical care because we don't know what germs are yet. So there's this pivotal moment. Semmelweis has this suspicion that it has to do with the medical dissections, and that's where the difference lies. There's this breakthrough moment, though, in 1847 when a friend of his, Yakov Koleska, got a cut from a scalpel that was used on a dissection and basically died of childbed fever. And that's what made Semmelweis think there was this connection between the cadaver examinations and the spread of childbed fever. Fun fact for you specifically, Andrea, Jacob Koleska practiced forensic medicine.
Ooh, that is a fun fact for me specifically.
I saw that and I was like, oh, I know who's going to be tickled by this.
Yeah, I'm going to Google him later.
Unfortunately, he's
dead, yeah.
Well,
but
so is a lot of people in this story are dead because it happened 200 years ago. But
not all of them.
And not who you think.
Unfortunately, the big thing he's known for is dying of childbed fever.
Womp womp.
Yeah, sometimes a bad bitch just gets taken down.
Diva down.
There's lots of divas down from childbed fever, sounds like.
Unfortunately,
losing divas left and right.
You know who isn't losing divas? The street.
The second hospital.
Yeah, hell yeah, midwives. So Semmelweis is convinced that there's some sort of material being carried from the morgue to the labor ward, and he makes his students / like everyone he has authority over start dipping their hands in chlorinated lime and water before they're allowed to examine patients. And I don't know what that... I know people would complain that it like was uncomfortable to put chlorine bleach on your hands, basically. I'm wondering if someone has just like dipped their hands in strong pool water and then they're just kind of touching you while you give... Would that sting?
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, it's preferable to dying.
Yeah,
but...
I mean, I guess a lot of things about giving birth probably sting.
Isn't this also how rubber gloves came into existence? This might be connect back to the cocaine boat guy, but they had to dip their hands and they got really dried out, and a nurse started complaining about it basically, and he was in love with her, and so he figured out he got I think it was wax or something, so she ended up dipping her hands in the chlorine bleach solution and then dipping them into wax so that her hands wouldn't get dried out.
It seems like horniness drives medical innovation, and
so does cocaine.
Christianity doesn't, as does cocaine.
Cocaine Doctor sounds like it's definitely part of the same cinematic universe as Cocaine Bear.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Once
he starts doing, implementing this chlorinated lime and water regimen.
I have one more thing to say about Cocaine Doctor. He did so much cocaine that they kicked him out of the hospitals in New York.
All of them?
Yeah, he wasn't allowed to work in New York anymore. He had to move to Maryland, and where he then worked at Johns Hopkins, I believe, until the end of his career.
A lot of things are legal at Johns Hopkins.
How did he get so much cocaine?
Bought it with money?
He's a doctor.
Okay.
I don't know how to get cocaine right now, so I couldn't tell you how he got cocaine.
It just seems like it's expensive, but maybe it was less expensive at the time.
He's a doctor.
He's
got
doctor.
that doctoring money.
Doctors got cocaine money.
Some doctors have car money, others have cocaine money. Rarely do you have both.
It's a fund.
But yeah, once people start dipping their hands in this lime solution, there's an almost immediate impact. The mortality rate drops by 90%, and within I think 2 or 3 months is comparable to the second clinic being run by midwives.
I feel like this would put him in his folklore era, because that's the one where she's no longer with Scooter, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the first one. She's no longer with Scooter, right? Okay, so then he's free of germs. He's left his old germ life behind. And now he's going to go back and revive his old patients who died and redo their birth so that they live this time. And he owns them, I guess.
I think it's actually his lover era because it is the first time he's free of Scooter Braun / germs, but it doesn't really know what to do with the power yet. There's a lot of pushback. I was just getting to that.
Oh my God, that's beautiful.
There's like this enormous amount of pushback because germ theory, I think, had been established, but it wasn't accepted as mainstream medicine. Just a fun little side fact. Do either of you know what the miasma theory of disease is?
Yeah, that's when it's just like in the air.
Yeah, it's just bad air.
Yeah, it's like COVID, honestly. The very beginning of COVID where everyone was like, ah!
Where they were like, we need to put plexiglass up because we're going to breathe at each other. But yeah, it's basically just, that's stinky. There's probably disease in that.
Wow, I never really thought about it until now, but I feel like living through the part of COVID when no one knew anything about the virus seems like what it was like to live in like the 1800s.
Yeah. So yeah, there's all this pushback because, I mean, in a stunning turn of events, classism is involved. There's this idea that a doctor is a gentleman and a gentleman's hands are always clean, even when they come out of surgery. So he faced a lot of opposition to his claims that hand washing was important. And it was actually really interesting because he had the proof that it was successful. Like, it was an effective thing to do because every time he was able to implement hand washing regulations, mortality rates dropped. But he wasn't able to say why it worked. And there would be these other changes being made as he would implement these changes, such as, you know, like ventilation systems would be modified and brought up. So that like also enforces the miasma theory of disease of like, oh, we're getting better air in this area, just like, and we're also washing our hands. So we don't know which one it is. A fun fact, he actually, like, the only reason the chlorinated lime solution that he made people use, he made people do that because it made their hands not stink of dead bodies anymore. Ooh. He didn't know that, like, it actually was killing bacteria. He was just like, oh, it makes them not stink.
Yeah, I was going to ask that because I was like, how did he not know why the death rate was going down if he was having people put their hands in stuff that kills bacteria?
Because they didn't know what bacteria was. This was like 20 or so years before Pasteur's work on germs.
As someone who doesn't know a lot about medical history, unlike Caro, who reads a lot of books about medical history and works adjacent to medicine, I'm trying to be vague because, you know.
I also read a lot of books about medical history. I also want to compliment.
You also read a lot of books about medical history, and you are also an engineer. Yeah, I feel like I just don't know a lot about this, so I'm like, I can't imagine being like, I'm gonna like wipe my ass with my hand and then not do anything about it.
I say this with an enormous amount of respect for the medical field. We've been being doctors way longer than we've been good at doctoring, so...
You used to basically be able to roll up to somewhere and be like, I'm a doctor now.
Yeah, that's like when some medical schools try to be like, we're so prestigious. We started in the 1700s. I'm like, yeah, that's not, it was not hard to be a medical school back then. You basically just said, we're making doctors now. And everyone would be like, cool.
It used to be like a trade. Like, you would apprentice with the other town's doctor. And then, like, 2 years, you're a doctor now. When did they switch from, like, just regular washing their hands from dipping them in lime?
I don't know. This is also, I mean, the 1800s, indoor plumbing was, like, starting to become a thing. More massive water filtration systems citywide are becoming more common, but they're not super commonplace. So they might have also gone with, like, dipping your hands in the bowl because... they didn't necessarily have, like, the best running water all the time. I don't actually know about that. But I don't think they would have had antibacterial soap because they wouldn't have realized...
They don't know how to do antibacterial anything yet.
Yeah, they don't know what bacterial is. It's hard to anti something you don't know about. But yeah, so he's implementing hand washing. He's getting really unpopular because he's right, and he's also being kind of a dick nose about it and, like, yelling at people, just being like, I don't need to prove that this works. It just does. You should do it. And everyone's like, well, we don't know. No.
There will be no whatever, there will only be reputation. I don't remember what her weird tagline for that era is, but I feel like he's in his reputation era.
Absolutely.
Oh.
This is his reputation era. He
met a snake. Got really into snakes for a while. So, do you guys know snakes have 2 penises?
Whoa.
even the girls?
No. No. So for all the snakes in the world, there's 1 penis, which means every male snake has 2 penises. I don't know what to do with this. It's just something I know.
I feel like the people will like it. The elephant in the room here is that this has nothing to do with the internet, but you know what? I feel like people that listen to our podcast are just a bunch of weirdos who want to hear about weird medical stuff and snake penises. So
I thought the point of this episode was that they're famously not internet.
yeah.
We're 30 minutes in. If people haven't realized that the 1800s aren't going to be heavy on internet content, that's on them.
Not a lot going on Twitter in the moment.
Twitter will not be invented for about another 200 years.
Ignac Semmelweis would have loved it.
I'm wondering if he would have been like one of those doctors who's like dancing on TikTok being like, chlorinated lime.
Oh, with the pointing?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think so, based off his vibe.
I really hate those TikToks. They feel really uncomfortable for me.
There's a lot of cringe content on the internet. Semmelweis gets kicked out of Vienna General Hospital for political reasons. He was a Hungarian nationalist. I think around this time, he just started wearing a lot of pro-nationalist costumes and stuff to lectures and would just occasionally do political lectures in the middle of his medical lectures.
Well, I got you here.
While you're captive, let me talk to you about the free nation of Hungary and how I want that.
It's like when Oppenheimer was a communist sympathizer.
Yeah. And he got kicked out of Vienna General Hospital and left the country without saying goodbye to anyone, and it kind of hurt people's feelings.
Aww.
Reputation error.
Absolutely, but now he's moving into his clean era because from 1851 to 1857, he holds several different positions in Hungarian medical establishment. He implements hand washing wherever he went, and those regulations are always followed by rapid declines in childbed fever. So he was drowning, but then he could finally breathe.
Is that a Taylor Swift thing?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought so.
He also got married in 1857. He and his wife, Maria Weidenhofer, they had 5 children together. And I wonder how terrifying his wife's pregnancies must have been for him. Of like, I know exactly all the ways this can go wrong because of choices people make.
That's got to be like every obstetrician.
Mm-hmm.
But it was okay because he was dipping his hands in chlorine water.
Mm-hmm. Throughout this time, he's trying to publish about hand washing. He wasn't exclusively getting pushback. There were people who were saying, like, this is working. A lot of people who were working under him and didn't necessarily have, like, ingrained ideas about how medicine should be were quick to adopt his ideas. So they would go up to their other institutions and talk about hand washing. They were publishing in various journals, but he just wasn't getting mainstream acceptance yet. In 1861, he published a book called The Etology, Concept, and Prophylaxis of Childbed Fever. He both made the case for hand washing in this book and also complained a bunch that no one wanted to wash their hands. This is when he just kind of loses the plot a little bit.
Speaking of losing the plot, I've looked up the name of the man who's the cocaine doctor. His name was William Stewart Halstead. He died when he was 69. Nice. And he was an early champion of anesthetics. So that's why I keep confused with this joker. Because he didn't know that they were anesthetics, but he was like, oh shit, anesthetics? We should probably be using those. Also, I'm going to do a lot of cocaine.
I'm going to put my patients down and I'm going to go up, up, up.
Yeah. Diva down, diva up.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciated it.
You're welcome. He also did a mastectomy. He also did mastectomies. I believe he did his mother's mastectomy on his kitchen table.
There's a lot of table surgeries in the history of medicine because Joseph Lister also did either his sister or sister-in-law's mastectomy on his dining room table.
That's just fun. He also is the guy who did rubber gloves. I was right.
You're so smart.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. I'm so good at remembering things.
Like, I'm thinking about, like, why didn't these people wash their hands? But then we also did live through the time when a lot of people didn't want to wear masks, even though it was scientifically proven that you and the people around you would be less likely to get sick with a potentially lethal virus if you wore a mask.
And it also wasn't quite scientifically proven. Like, he had good evidence, and like we know in hindsight that he was right, but this is before microscopy was a thing, was super mainstream. I think he could have done some microscopy.
Define microscopy.
So that was when microscopes were so new and finicky that knowing how to use one was a very specialized skill. And he probably could have learned how to do it and proved his case better. But he, not unreasonably, was like, why do I need to explain why it works? It just clearly does.
He didn't hustle hard enough.
Yeah, grind culture. He said no. Mm-hmm. The reviews of his book, The Etiology, Concept, and Prophylaxis of Childbed Fever, got similar reception as the rest of his work, and his mental state just really rapidly deteriorated. He started writing all these open letters, both to, quote, all obstetricians, as well as specific physicians in his field, calling them murderers. Just basically being like, gentlemen, there's blood on your hands. And
Literally.
Literally. His behavior became increasingly erratic. There's been speculation that he suffered perhaps from like rapid onset dementia. There's also some speculation that he possibly had third stage syphilis, which was apparently really common in obstetricians at the time.
Touching a lot of people's vaginas.
Yeah.
If that person has syphilis, you're kind of fucked.
Well, but he's washing his hands.
Not at the beginning, though. That's why it's in the third stage.
Do you think obstetricians were just kind of like touching someone's labia and then just like wiping their eyes a bunch? Like, how did this...
If he has an open wound on his hand.
True. Other people think it was possibly just like stress and rage that made him break from social norms and call his colleagues murderers in the paper.
Girl boss.
Me when I get mad at everyone else.
Honestly, it's not dissimilar from what George Santos is doing right now. In 1865, his wife and friends had him confined to a mental institution. They actually tricked him into it. They were like, oh, you're just going to go regular see a mental institution as a doctor. And then he got there and they're like, kidding, you're a patient now.
Oof.
Yeah.
Low-key what they did to John Mulaney as well.
Do you think Ignac Semmelweis walked in the room and, like John Mulaney said, oh, this is my intervention?
I think he walked into the room and, like John Mulaney was like, oh, I'm the funniest person in here.
Do you think that he walked into the room and was like, let me tell you all about hand washing?
Probably.
But, like, he was right.
He was right. He tried to escape the mental institution, and the guards unfortunately beat him, and he died as a result of the infections from those wounds. Yeah.
Rough end for Ignac Semmelweis.
Yeah.
Damn.
Around 20 years after his death, Louis Pasteur's work on germ theory offered the theoretical explanation that Semmelweis's work was always missing, that helped lead to more mainstream acceptance of hand washing and just general antiseptic techniques in general. Joseph Lister, whose antiseptic techniques were like one of the first ones and were really important in making surgery safer, he was inspired by Semmelweis's work around childbed fever. And a fun fact that I know you know this, Louis Pasteur and Joseph Lister were little friends. They were buddies.
Oh.
And they their work complemented each other, and instead of being enemies, they just kept being like, what'd you learn about bestie?
Maybe the real germ theory is the friends you made along the way.
I mean, joy is contagious.
Oh.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
That's the story of Ignac Semmelweis. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts?
Poor guy.
Yeah, he went down.
Diva down hard.
If anyone's interested in a more cohesive version of this story, I highly recommend The Doctor's Plague by Sherman B. Newland. It's a pretty short book, but it's very detailed.
Or if you want to hear anything else about Joseph Lister or Louis Pasteur, read The Butchering Art by Lindsay Fitzpatrick.
I highly recommend that book if you have a strong stomach. She's a vivid writer.
All right, well, we've been recording for 40 minutes, so I am going to cut this episode in half. we will have Andrea back in the next time that Isabel and I are both dying and still want to put out a podcast to talk about whale falls. If you like this episode, tell a friend. Word of mouth is how we grow. Thank you to Andrea and Caro, as well as all of our patrons. Shout out to specifically to Zoe, Bray, Andromeda, Thea, Brian, Gabriel, Lotta, Nat, Max, my sugar daddy Sam, that's Isabel's sugar daddy Sam, and Aaron's husband. I don't know why we started saying Brian instead of Ultralord for Jimmy Neutron. I don't normally do the end notes, now I'm just editing them as I go. If you want your name in the above, it's not above, it's like we really gotta edit this, slide right into our Patreon at patreon.com/wowoftrue. Shout out to audio editors Allison Mills and David Newtown, graphic designer and Canva warlock Eric Silver, who made our logo, Sam Rizer, who made our podcast music, and Tessa Farrow, who is transcribing our episodes. You can find us at WowTruePod on Twitter, and we have the Instagram and Facebook in here too, but I never update them, so sorry. Until next time, let's get famous on the internet.